One point is that he just hit on me, and does it cross over into somebody who's a predator, you know?
It's the one movie Michelle Pfeiffer never wants to talk about. Not because she was bad in it, she wasn't. Not because it ruined her career, it didn't. But because of what it represented and who was there when it all went wrong.
He couldn't even speak to me. He couldn't even look at me. It didn't go well though, because we were in this restaurant and we didn't speak the whole night.
She once said, "I hated this movie." A role that was supposed to launch her into stardom left her feeling embarrassed, exposed, and almost ready to quit. So what really happened during that 1982 production? What made this film such a personal regret? And why has she avoided revisiting it for over 4 decades?
Peanut butter.
Ah, no, we don't stock stuff like that, lady.
I was only asking.
On Hate with a Vengeance, Michelle Pfeiffer never minced words when asked about Grease 2. Years after it was released, and long after she'd become one of the most respected actresses in Hollywood, she finally told the truth about how she really felt. Her exact words? "I hated that film with a vengeance and could not believe how bad it was." That wasn't a flippant remark or a lighthearted joke. It was a statement soaked in frustration, disappointment, and lingering embarrassment. For someone as notoriously private and diplomatic as Pfeiffer, it was as close to a public disowning as you'll ever hear. Back in 1982, Pfeiffer wasn't the icon we know today. She was 23 years old, relatively unknown, and still figuring out who she was in an industry that chews people up by the minute. Her casting in Grease 2 wasn't the result of a careful, strategic plan. It was, by her own admission, a fluke. She wasn't a dancer. She wasn't a trained singer. Her agent told her to show up, and she did, wearing a short purple skirt and go-go boots, blending into a long line of hopefuls. She kept sneaking to the back of the line after every round of eliminations, until suddenly she was the lead. And just like that, she was thrown headfirst into a high-stakes production she wasn't ready for. The original Grease had been a massive cultural force, one of the most successful musicals in movie history. But Grease 2 was a different story. From the beginning, the tone felt off. The songs were lighter, sillier, and at times downright baffling. The script replaced heartfelt nostalgia with a strange mix of parody and chaos. Instead of clever reinvention, it leaned on recycled plot lines, awkward choreography, and broad characters. Pfeiffer knew it the moment she read the material. This wasn't a great film. It wasn't even a good one. But she took the job anyway. She was young, untested, and eager to work.
And seemed like a world away from where I grew up in Midway City, Orange County.
As production rolled on, her doubts turned into dread. Scenes felt disjointed. Direction was inconsistent. And worst of all, Pfeiffer could feel the weight of the movie pressing down on her shoulders. She wasn't just in the film, she was leading it. The entire story revolved around her character, Stephanie Zenone, a tough girl with leather jackets, sunglasses, and a rebellious streak. It was supposed to be a bold reimagining of the classic bad boy trope, except this time, the girl had the swagger. But behind the scenes, Pfeiffer didn't feel empowered. She felt completely exposed. There were no safety nets, no veteran co-stars guiding her through it, no experienced musical background to rely on, and there certainly wasn't a strong script to elevate the material. Critics would later pan the movie for being aimless and awkward, with clunky dialogue and forgettable music. But Pfeiffer didn't need reviews to tell her that. She lived it. Every take, every awkward dance number, every forced romantic beat, she could feel it unraveling. Yet, for all the technical problems and creative misfires, there was one factor that made the entire experience even worse. It wasn't just the film itself that left a bitter taste. It was her co-star, the man she was supposed to fall in love with on screen, the guy who would become her romantic counterpart in scene after scene. She hadn't anticipated how difficult that relationship would be. The awkward chemistry, the uneven performances, the quiet friction. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't easy either. And as her discomfort with the film grew, that strained dynamic only amplified it.
Her first love and her only love, and I think, and there's a line in the movie where she says, you know, he was my whole life.
What Michelle Pfeiffer didn't know at the time was that Grease 2 wouldn't just be a bad movie. It would become the film that haunted her longest. And it all started with the man she was supposed to ride into the sunset with. But what she didn't expect was that her biggest regret wasn't just the film itself, it was the man cast opposite her. The co-star clash no one talks about. When audiences watched Grease 2 in theaters, they were supposed to believe in the love story. Stephanie Zinone, the leather-jacketed leader of the Pink Ladies, falling for the mysterious new kid Michael Carrington, an uptight English transfer student trying to win her over by becoming a motorcycle-riding cool rider. It was a classic opposites attract dynamic with a musical twist. But what looked flat on screen was reportedly even more strained behind the scenes. The chemistry felt off, the tension was real, and at the center of it all was Michelle Pfeiffer and her co-star, Maxwell Caulfield. Caulfield had just as much riding on the film as Pfeiffer did. It was his big break too, a rare shot at leading man status. Handsome, fresh-faced, and British, he was plucked from near-total obscurity and handed a role that could have launched him into teen idol territory. And in the beginning, it seemed like it would. He was being positioned as the next heartthrob, someone who could fill the shoes of John Travolta's Danny Zuko. But when filming began, it quickly became clear that all wasn't well between him and Pfeiffer. To be fair, neither Pfeiffer nor Caulfield has ever gone public with any dramatic accusations or explosive claims. There was no scandal, no headline-grabbing blow-up. But what they haven't said might be more telling than what they have. In the years following the film's release, the tension became apparent in how they spoke, cautiously, distantly, and with the kind of hesitation that suggests unresolved discomfort. Pfeiffer largely avoided discussing Caulfield altogether, while he, in contrast, did open up just enough to reveal something deeper. Years later, Caulfield admitted what many had long suspected. Seeing Pfeiffer's career explode while his own stalled was difficult. He told Page Six, "Michelle rose like a phoenix, right? Did Scarface?" That made it even, frankly, a little harder to swallow. There was no anger in his voice, just a quiet sting. He had watched his co-star go from a critically panned musical flop to starring opposite Al Pacino in one of the most iconic crime dramas of all time. Meanwhile, he struggled to find roles that matched the hype surrounding his debut. That quiet resentment didn't come from nowhere. On set, the contrast between them was obvious. Pfeiffer, while still unsure of herself behind the scenes, had a screen presence that the camera couldn't ignore. Despite her discomfort with the material, she carried herself with a confidence that felt effortless.
Yeah, it was very cool. It was a little embarrassing at times. You know, I'm in carpool with the kids and the song comes on and my son's like...
She didn't overplay her scenes. She didn't force anything. She simply was the character. Meanwhile, Caulfield, though committed, often came across as stiff, overly rehearsed, and at times disconnected. He tried to keep up, but the imbalance between them made scenes feel awkward rather than electric. Directors and crew noticed. Even fans picking up on the film's now cult status have pointed out the flat chemistry. The love story never quite takes off, and it's not because the characters are mismatched. It's because the actors seem to be playing two entirely different games. Pfeiffer looks like she's already outgrown the movie. Caulfield looks like he's clinging to it for dear life. Their scenes together became a strange push-pull of energy. She wanted to disappear from the set. He wanted to be discovered. And somewhere in between, the film suffered. For Pfeiffer, that mismatch was more than just an acting challenge. It reinforced the sense that Grease 2 wasn't the launchpad it was promised to be. It was chaos disguised as opportunity, and being paired with someone she couldn't connect with on screen or off made her feel even more isolated in a project she already doubted. And that awkward dynamic bled into every scene. But there was something else that soured the experience for Pfeiffer even more. A script doomed from day one. If there's one word that defines Grease 2, it's confusion. The film never knew what it wanted to be. Was it a cheeky update to a beloved classic? A satire? A serious musical with a rebellious edge? From the very first page, the script was already a mess. Gone was the charm and chemistry of the original. In its place were awkward set pieces, forced dialogue, and musical numbers that felt like parody, except no one seemed to be in on the joke. Songs about bowling, a sensual anthem about reproduction in a biology classroom, a motorcycle fantasy number that came out of nowhere. These weren't clever reinventions, they were baffling detours. The original Grease had heart. It captured the teenage longing, the summer night romance, the tension between image and identity. But Grease 2 tried to reverse the formula without respecting what made the first film work. Instead of a greaser and a goody-goody, this time the girl was the rebel, and the boy was the straight-laced outsider. On paper, that could have been an inspired twist. In execution, it felt like an idea without depth. The script leaned heavily on cliches and surface-level cool, hoping the aesthetic would mask the lack of substance. It didn't. Critics didn't just pan the film, they obliterated it. Roger Ebert famously wrote that the film lacked stars, energy, freshness, and even the grease. The New York Times was equally brutal, mocking the songs and calling the entire project hopelessly insubstantial. The consensus was swift and unforgiving. Grease 2 was not just a misfire, it was a waste of everyone's time. And no one felt that more acutely than Michelle Pfeiffer. At the time, Pfeiffer was still developing her voice as an actress. She was untrained in both singing and dancing, two things essential to a musical of this size. But the role demanded both, and there was no time to prepare. She was thrown in, expected to carry half the film's musical weight without the tools to do it properly. Her voice was thin, her movements were stiff, and yet she had to perform elaborate choreography while delivering lines with cool defiance. The result wasn't a failure of talent, it was a failure of preparation and direction. Pfeiffer felt exposed, and not in the empowering, vulnerable way some performances demand. This was different. She felt like a kid pretending to be a movie star, waiting for someone to notice she didn't belong. Every song she had to lip-sync, every dance number she had to stumble through only made her more aware that she was in a role she hadn't earned and didn't even want anymore. It wasn't just a professional embarrassment, it was personal. And yet, as the reviews poured in, most filled with venom and ridicule, there was one unexpected voice that broke through the noise, one that Pfeiffer didn't expect. Among the wreckage of Grease 2's reception, some critics noticed her, not the film, not the story, just her. The New York Times called her the film's one improvement over the original. They praised her screen presence, said she looked the most comfortable of anyone in the cast. It was a strange kind of praise, backhanded and bittersweet. On one hand, it hinted that there was something real beneath the layers of artificial charm the movie tried to force. On the other, it reminded her just how misplaced she had been, that even when she stood out, it was against a backdrop that felt like a joke. For Pfeiffer, being the best part of Grease 2 didn't feel like a win. It felt like a spotlight on something she wished she could undo. And yet, behind all the terrible reviews, one voice stood out.
She was the only improvement. Of all the surprises buried in Grease 2's disastrous reception, none were stranger than the unexpected praise aimed at Michelle Pfeiffer. Critics were merciless toward the movie, ripping into its paper-thin plot, forgettable songs, and clumsy execution. But somehow, Pfeiffer walked away with something resembling a compliment. The New York Times didn't just acknowledge her performance. It called her the film's one improvement over the original. That might sound like faint praise, but considering the backlash surrounding the sequel, it was a rare moment of validation. One spark of approval in a sea of disappointment. To audiences, Pfeiffer came across as effortlessly cool. She played Stephanie Zinoni with a kind of unbothered energy. Tough, stylish, and emotionally untouchable. She had a calm that read as confidence, a detached charm that made her the only thing in the film that didn't feel like it was trying too hard. In hindsight, it's easy to see why she stood out. While other cast members leaned into camp, Pfeiffer held her ground. She didn't push. She didn't perform like she was in a high school play. She just existed, and the camera noticed. But the irony wasn't lost on her. While the world was starting to see flashes of something promising, Pfeiffer herself didn't feel proud of what she'd done. In her mind, she hadn't earned any of that praise.
She knew what had happened behind the scenes, how she'd barely made it through auditions, how she hadn't trained in either dance or vocals, how she spent half of production doubting her every move. The approval felt disconnected from the truth. She wasn't a breakout star. She was a beginner who'd gotten lucky, and that disconnect planted a seed of imposter syndrome she couldn't shake. Being labeled the best part of a failure didn't feel like a win. It felt like a trap, because now people expected something from her, something she wasn't sure she could deliver. Her success in Grease 2, if you could even call it that, wasn't built on craft or preparation. It was built on instinct and luck. That's not the kind of foundation you build a career on, and deep down, Pfeiffer knew it. So instead of celebrating the positive reviews, she internalized the negative ones. She focused on what hadn't worked, on where she had fallen short. Behind the camera, she was still just a young woman trying to survive a role that never fit right. She remembered the dance rehearsals where she struggled to keep up, the vocal sessions that made her feel exposed, the long shooting days where she couldn't shake the feeling that she was the wrong person for the job. No amount of critical recognition could erase that. And for a newcomer with no formal training, that kind of doubt was more than just emotional baggage. It was career-threatening. There were moments during and after filming when she seriously considered quitting. She wasn't sure if she had what it took. She didn't know if acting was the right path. And with Grease 2 already becoming a punchline in industry circles, she worried she'd already been branded. The pretty face from the musical no one liked. The kind of actress you cast for image, not depth. A placeholder, not a performer. Still, something inside her resisted. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the tiniest sliver of belief that she hadn't shown the world her real potential yet. Whatever it was, she didn't walk away. Not yet. And for an actress just starting out, that imposter syndrome was enough to nearly make her walk away. From musical misstep to cinematic icon, failure can crush a career, or it can light a fire. For Michelle Pfeiffer, Grease 2 did both. In the immediate aftermath, it left her uncertain, exposed, and questioning everything. But just 1 year later, something extraordinary happened. She landed the role of Elvira Hancock in Scarface, and everything changed. Suddenly, she was no longer the girl from Grease 2. She was the woman holding her own opposite Al Pacino in one of the most brutal, stylized crime epics ever made. And just like that, Michelle Pfeiffer's career was reborn. The timing couldn't have been more poetic. Scarface gave Pfeiffer everything Grease 2 lacked: grit, depth, edge, and danger. Where Grease 2 asked her to sing about bowling and teenage rebellion, Scarface asked her to play a woman suffocating under power and addiction. It was raw, demanding, and unforgettable, and she delivered. Critics raved, audiences noticed, and the industry that had once whispered about her being miscast suddenly saw a different story. Elvira wasn't just a role, it was a statement, a declaration that she belonged. Behind the scenes, Pfeiffer carried something even more powerful: the weight of her early failure. She never forgot how it felt to stand on that Grease 2 set and wonder if she was a fraud. That embarrassment, that self-doubt, didn't disappear. It hardened. She used it. Every role after that became a chance to prove that Grease 2 was a fluke, not a forecast. And prove it she did. Over the next decade, she built a resume most actors would envy. In The Witches of Eastwick, she stood shoulder to shoulder with Cher, Susan Sarandon, and Jack Nicholson, and held her own. In Dangerous Liaisons, she gave a performance so vulnerable and layered that it earned her an Oscar nomination. Then came The Fabulous Baker Boys, where she didn't just act, she stunned. Draped in a red dress atop a piano, singing "Makin' Whoopee," Pfeiffer turned in a performance that cemented her as both a serious actress and an unforgettable screen presence. And then came Batman Returns. Pfeiffer as Catwoman wasn't just casting brilliance, it was cultural lightning. Clad in stitched black leather, flipping between fury and fragility, she created a character that has outlasted every reboot. Critics called her turn ferocious, layered, and iconic. It became the role of a generation, and perhaps the defining moment of her career. She wasn't just a movie star. She was an icon, but success comes with its own ghosts. Even as Pfeiffer's fame skyrocketed, one shadow kept following her, the lingering presence of Grease 2. No matter how many awards she earned, no matter how many powerful roles she inhabited, some fans just wouldn't let it go. The film developed a cult following over time, especially among younger audiences and in queer communities. To them, Pfeiffer's Stephanie Zinone wasn't a misstep. She was a symbol. Cool, rebellious, unapologetic. The kind of woman who didn't wait around for approval. And so, the film that nearly ended her career kept coming back, not as shame, but as nostalgia, as kitsch, as camp. And with it came questions, interviews, tributes, references. No matter how far she ran from Grease 2, it found its way back to her, over and over again. For Pfeiffer, this created a strange dynamic. She had grown, evolved, and become one of the most respected actresses of her era. But part of her story would always be tied to that one movie she tried so hard to forget. But even as her fame skyrocketed, one shadow kept following her, and fans just wouldn't let it go. When a cult following isn't welcome. For most actors, cult status is a kind of redemption. A second life for a film that flopped the first time around. A way for audiences, especially younger generations, to reclaim and reinterpret something once discarded. But for Michelle Pfeiffer, the rising cult following of Grease 2 felt less like vindication and more like a reminder. A reminder of a movie she'd tried to move on from. A role she never wanted to define her. And a chapter of her career she thought had long been buried. Yet, buried it wasn't. Somewhere along the way, Grease 2 started to gather momentum, not in mainstream film circles, but in late-night screenings, niche internet forums, and drag performances. Fans began to view the film not as a failed sequel, but as a campy, chaotic, endlessly quotable oddity. In queer spaces especially, the movie found a home. Stephanie Zinone, with her leather jacket, sunglasses, and refusal to conform to male expectations, was reimagined as a feminist icon. Her defiance was empowering. Her style, effortlessly cool. She didn't chase romance, she demanded respect. It wasn't about the plot, or the songs, or even the acting. It was about the vibe. Fans just wouldn't let it go. When a cult following isn't welcome. For most actors, cult status is a kind of redemption. A second life for a film that flopped the first time around. A way for audiences, especially younger generations, to reclaim and reinterpret something once discarded. But for Michelle Pfeiffer, the rising cult following of Grease 2 felt less like vindication and more like a reminder. A reminder of a movie she'd tried to move on from. A role she never wanted to define her. And a chapter of her career she thought had long been buried. Yet, buried it wasn't. Somewhere along the way, Grease 2 started to gather momentum, not in mainstream film circles, but in late-night screenings, niche internet forums, and drag performances. Fans began to view the film not as a failed sequel, but as a campy, chaotic, endlessly quotable oddity. In queer spaces especially, the movie found a home. Stephanie Zinone, with her leather jacket, sunglasses, and refusal to conform to male expectations, was reimagined as a feminist icon. Her defiance was empowering. Her style, effortlessly cool. She didn't chase romance, she demanded respect. It wasn't about the plot, or the songs, or even the acting. It was about the vibe. Stage adaptations followed. Fan edits of Pfeiffer's Cool Rider performance popped up online with cult commentary. Memes, TikToks, retrospectives. It all blended into a retroactive love letter to a movie that had once been universally mocked. Suddenly, the same film that Pfeiffer had described as so bad it made her cringe was being celebrated. But for her, the affection came with an odd kind of discomfort. This wasn't nostalgia she could share. It was still a source of regret. She spoke about it, carefully, in interviews. In 2019, while appearing on The Late Late Show with James Corden, she mentioned that Grease 2 remained one of the top 3 films fans asked her about. Not The Fabulous Baker Boys, not Dangerous Liaisons, but Grease 2. She laughed it off, told the casting story, even recalled how she got the role by sneaking to the back of the audition line over and over again. But when Corden joked about the movie being gifted to all of us, Pfeiffer's reaction was telling. A bowed head, an awkward smile, and a glance at the floor. It wasn't bitterness. It was something closer to resignation. Because no matter how far her career had come, Grease 2 was always there, lurking in the background like an inside joke the world wouldn't stop telling. The irony, of course, was that it had become exactly what it failed to be the first time around. Loved, but not for the reasons she would have wanted. And just when it seemed like she might finally be warming up to the film's strange afterlife, something happened. A popular entertainment outlet ran a story quoting her now infamous 2007 line, "I hated that film with a vengeance," and included her in a list of stars who regretted their early roles. The story went viral. Fans resurfaced the quote. Social media exploded with debates and reactions. But this time, Pfeiffer wasn't silent. She took to Instagram stories and clapped back. "This project is, and has always been, so special to me and my history," she wrote. Then, in classic deadpan style, she added, "One should never trust a publication to get quotes right if they can't even bother to spell the person's name correctly." It was half denial, half drag, and it raised more questions than it answered. Had she changed her mind? Was she protecting the film now? Or was she simply tired of having her worst professional experience reduced to a meme? And just when people thought she'd come around, she clapped back at a major outlet for twisting her words, setting the record straight, but not so fast. When Michelle Pfeiffer's old quote resurfaced in a BuzzFeed article, "I hated that film with a vengeance," and could not believe how bad it was, fans took notice. Some laughed, some defended her, and others felt validated in their affection for a film long considered a cinematic misfire. But Pfeiffer didn't just let the moment pass. She fired back, quietly but unmistakably. Taking to Instagram stories, she criticized the outlet not just for dredging up the quote, but for botching something far more basic: her name. "One should never trust a publication to get quotes right if they can't even bother to spell the person's name correctly," she wrote. It was sharp, it was dry, and it was loaded with subtext. But here's the thing, while she disputed the framing of the story, she didn't exactly deny what she'd said. She didn't claim to love the film now. She didn't take back her words in full. Instead, she called Grease too special to her history, a phrase that's more about personal growth than cinematic pride. It was a careful reframing, not a reversal, not an endorsement, just a softening. So, did she change her mind? Not really. Her relationship with Grease 2 has always been complicated. On one hand, it gave her a lead role in a major studio release. It put her name on a marquee. It opened the door that led to Scarface and everything that followed. But on the other hand, it was a project that left her feeling like an imposter. In interviews, Pfeiffer has been candid about how she got the role. It wasn't some moment of triumph or artistic breakthrough. It was luck, or, as she put it herself, a total fluke. She wasn't a dancer. She wasn't a trained singer. She hadn't spent years grinding through Broadway auditions or fine-tuning her voice in vocal classes. She was just another young actress hoping to catch a break. She showed up to an open call in go-go boots and a short skirt, kept sneaking back into the audition line every time they tried to cut her, and somehow landed the part. That story might sound charming in retrospect, but for Pfeiffer, it's always been laced with discomfort. Because Grease 2 didn't just throw her into the spotlight, it did so before she was ready. She was placed at the center of a major production with little support, limited experience, and no real idea how to navigate it. She was forced to perform in front of cameras and crews without the skills most leads take for granted. And when the movie failed, she couldn't even defend it on artistic grounds. She knew the script was weak. She knew the direction was scattered. And she knew her performance, however praised, came from a place of improvisation and survival, not confidence or craft. Grease 2 didn't ruin her. If anything, it gave her the chance to grow. But it also exposed something she would spend years trying to outrun, a version of herself that was naive, voiceless, and completely out of control. Not just over the production, but over her own narrative. She didn't choose the movie. She fell into it, and it showed. The regret wasn't just about the film. It was about how it reflected a moment in her life where she didn't yet know how to say no. So when Pfeiffer bristles at questions about Grease 2, it's not about bitterness, it's about memory, about the fear of being seen not as the powerhouse actress she became, but as the uncertain girl who hoped no one would notice she was lost. That's the version of herself she's never really forgiven. In a career filled with unforgettable roles, Grease 2 stands out for all the wrong reasons. It wasn't a scandal, it wasn't a disaster, but for Michelle Pfeiffer, it was a warning about control, about confidence, and about what happens when you say yes too soon. She's never truly disowned the film, but she's never embraced it either. So, if you ever wonder why Grease 2 barely gets a mention in retrospectives, now you know. For Michelle Pfeiffer, once was enough. Like, comment, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories. And tap the next video to uncover another star's forgotten regret.